All right, this book is titled Apples to Oregon. It's slightly true. I'm assuming it's kind of like the Johnny Appleseed story. We're not quite entirely sure if Johnny Appleseed was real, but this is a good start. So this journey starts in Salem, Iowa, and makes its way across Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho, and Oregon. Wyoming, Idaho, and they end up in Oregon, which is kind of cool because we just watched something about the Oregon Trail. Should be fun. So, the story starts now. My daddy loved growing apples, and when he got ready to pull up roots and leave Iowa for Oregon, he couldn't bear to leave his apple trees behind. So Daddy built two of the largest boxes you could ever hope to see. He set them into a sturdy wagon and shoveled in good, wormy dirt. Then he filled every inch with little plants and trees, hundreds of them. Daddy was ready for the most daring adventure in the history of fruit. Apples ho, he cried. Along with apples, my daddy took peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries. Oh, and by the way, he took us along too. We all had lots to do on the journey. Each morning I helped Mama bake biscuits while Daddy prepared for another long day on the trail. At night, Mama and I tucked in the little ones. Then Daddy fiddled lullabies under the stars. Why, I can still hear him crooning with the Gravensteins. Hush, little babies, don't you cry. Mama's gonna bake you an apple pie. If that apple pie ain't sweet, Daddy's gonna munch you for his own special treat. Kind of silly, but check him out playing. Trying to make his family feel good. It's a pretty good dad to play music to help his kids go to sleep on the prairies. Pretty interesting. We rolled along just fine till we came to the Platte River. It was wider than Texas, thicker than Mama's muskrat stew, and muddier than a cowboy's toenails. Just looking at it made my insides shrivel. The river bank was crowded with folks in prairie schooners trying to get up the nerve to cross. Look at all the folks. Now, when they saw us and all our little fruit trees fluttering in the breeze, they burst out laughing. Those leaves will be blown as dirt before you hit the plains, declared one old geezer. Plains? Scoffed someone. That nursery wagon won't make it halfway across the river. Ha ha! Sorry, I'm trying to channel my inner Silver Dollar City voice. But Daddy didn't let their talk worry him. He just looked me square in the eye and said, "Delicious, I'm going to need your help." Right then and there, we built a raft for his tiny trees. Then Daddy loaded me and the little sister and brothers onto the edges. Now, make sure my precious plants don't topple into the water, Daddy warned. Man, this guy seems to really love his family. Doesn't it seem like he loves his trees just a little bit more? Well, we hadn't gone far when that muddy drink started to pull us down. "The peaches are plummeting," my sister shouted. "The plums are plunging," boomed my brother. "Don't let my babies go belly up," howled Daddy. Well, I had to think quick. "We're too heavy. If we don't go faster, we'll sink. We got to take our shoes off and kick." And so we kicked. Of course, we'd all been raised on apples, and everyone knows youngins raised on apples are strong, mighty strong. Before you could say Johnny Appleseed, we'd kicked ourselves clear to the other shore. But no sooner had we got every last tree loaded back in the wagon than I spied a foul-looking bunch of clouds stomping round the sun, just fit to be tied. What do you think's going to happen? Harmony, what do you think's going to happen? All right, well, the wind began to throw around everything that wasn't lashed down. Our boots, baby Albert's diapers, every pot and pan Mama had, our own little wagon was even tossed around. Next, hailstorms as big as plums came hurtling out of the sky. "Guard the grapes! Protect the peaches!" Daddy howled. So we all started tearing off our clothes and holding them over Daddy's darlings. Bonnets, petticoats, trousers, hats, even Daddy's drawers. Yeah, seems like it. Look at them. They're all trying to help these plants stay alive. They must be really valuable. Whew! At last, the storm passed and Daddy's dainties were safe. After all that excitement, it felt good to hit the trail again. But before long, we came to an endless sandy desert. Now remember, us youngins didn't have our wagon or our boots. In no time, our feet were redder than the poison apple the old witch gave to Snow White. Delicious? This is our toughest challenge, said Daddy, wiping his brow as I followed him on tippy toes. We gotta find a water hole or my babies are done for. Starting to really worry about this father.
Yeah.
Sure enough, by noon the fruit trees began to droop. By 3, their itty-bitty tender leaves were getting crispy. By nightfall, Daddy was crying, a handful of dead branches pressed against his heart. I couldn't even bear to see my daddy suffer. So, early next morning, I took off to look for water. But although I searched and searched, I couldn't even find a splash or a puddle. After a while, I got so tuckered out, I plopped down under an old sagebrush. Man, that's dangerous. Ouch! I yelled, landing on something hard. But when I saw what it was, I whooped for joy. My very own boot. What's more, it still had some water in it from all those melted hailstones. That was our lucky day, let me tell you. We found every one of Mama's pots and pans spread out across the sand. They all had a few drops of water in them too, just enough to get Daddy's trees to the next water hole before they all keeled over. My, that first sip of water sure tasted good. Even if I did have to wait my turn behind some Baldwin apples. Oh, and I'm pleased to say our wagon and all the boots turned up too, all except one. I reckon that nasty wind blew my left boot clear to the other side of the moon, and if it should happen to drop out of the sky on your head one of these days, I'd sure appreciate you sending it along to me. Oh, and look at this in the background. They're all hooting and hollering. We got Daddy playing his fiddle and all the other kids just having a good old time. And this boot. Make sure she only has 5 toes. So we all kept on going, past Courthouse Rock and Chimney Rock and Independence Rock and lots of other rocks that didn't have names. We climbed up the rocks and down the rocks, and at last we reached the Columbia River. Up and down rocks, up and down rocks. Pulling them all up. Mama's got the baby, and just 100 miles to go, Daddy declared. Well, checking out this picture. What a beautiful picture. But time was running out. Our little trees had almost drowned in the river, got pounded by hailstones, and got withered by drought. How much more could they take? And now we were set for a showdown with the most ornery vermin of all, Jack Frost. Oh, I'd already spied him sneaking around our campsite, brushing the cottonwoods with his cold white tongue, but I wasn't about to let him get close to my daddy's apples. So that night, I made a big fire and sat by it, watching for Jack Frost to show himself. Sure enough, as soon as the moon came up, I spotted the old good-for-nothing slinking around the meadow, heading straight for the sweet Junes. I got ready to fight. Jack Frost came at me, turning the ground so cold my toes went numb, but I didn't give up. I grabbed a flaming stick and threw it right at him. Before you could say, Peter Piper picked a peck of pretty pipkins. That low-down scoundrel was hightailing it out of here, heading straight for Walla Walla, Washington. I'm mighty grateful, Delicious, said Daddy as he scrutinized his sweeties the next morning. Thanks to you, even the sweets stayed snug. We were nice and cozy too, added Mama, checking the children. It must have been because of that fire she used. Now, sure enough, all Daddy's trees survived, just as if they'd come across the plains in a swanky carriage. We floated them We floated them on boats down the mighty Columbia to a pretty place near Portland. Then we planted them on in that sweet Oregon dirt at last. Now, we were a couple more pages. Sorry, I was about to reflect. Gold was discovered in California not long after that, and thousands of people rushed there to seek their fortunes. Hey, we talked about that the other day. This reminds me of a TV show I once watched. I'll tell you about it later. But not us. We already had our fortune. Those apples, peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries made us richer than any prospector. We were happier too. After all, apples taste a whole lot better than gold. Golden delicious apples? You think that came from it? As for my daddy, he was always sweet as a peach. He and Mama lived happily to a ripe old age. Daddy never forgot my brave deeds on the trail. Why, as soon as he sold his first bushel of apples, he bought me the prettiest pair of boots you ever saw. Delicious? Said Daddy. You'll always be the apple of my eye. So now, we talked about how it sounded a lot like this guy cared more about his trees and his kids, but maybe that's because he had to. I wonder why he had to care so much about these apples. But maybe that's to be decided on our discussion board. So make sure after you read this, you head on over to our Canvas page in discussions and look for the one that says Apples to Oregon. And maybe we can talk about this daddy and his character development. So until then, I can't wait for our next read aloud, and I can't wait to read your opinions on our discussion board. Have a great day. I'll see you later.